Does true strength come from muscles, or is there something more behind someone's power? Samson, known as the strongest man in the Bible, is famous for his physical feats. But what if the greatest lesson from his story isn't about strength but about weakness and redemption? Today, let's dive into the life of Samson and discover if his strength was really what defined him or if it was something even greater that brought his true victory. Samson's story begins in an extraordinary way. Even before he was born, he was part of a divine plan. His mother, who was barren, was visited by an angel of the Lord who announced that she would have a son destined to deliver Israel from the oppression of the Philistines. Judges 13 verses 3-5. This announcement wasn't just about the birth of a child, it indicated that Samson would have a special role in the history of the people of Israel. His life was marked from the beginning with the mission of being an instrument of God, consecrated as a Nazirite. As a Nazirite, Samson was subject to a set of rules that set him apart for divine service. He could not cut his hair, consume alcohol, or touch impure things. The Nazirite vow was the channel through which Samson's strength flowed, establishing a direct connection with God. His strength, therefore, was not merely physical or innate but depended on his obedience to this consecration. Samson's strength makes us think, to what extent are our gifts sustained by our spiritual connection? From the moment of his birth, Samson already carried a huge responsibility, even before understanding his mission. This makes us reflect on how often we are called to something greater, often without realizing it. God may have purposes for us that transcend our immediate understanding, and sometimes the beginning of that calling happens even before we are ready to comprehend it. Samson was not only called to be strong but to be obedient and faithful to the divine mission. And this raises an important question for us. Are we prepared to carry the responsibilities given to us, even when we do not fully understand God's plans? Samson's journey reminds us that our true strength may lie in our ability to obey and trust, not just in our evident gifts. When we think of Samson, his feats of physical strength are what come to mind most. However, his first great demonstration of power didn't happen on a battlefield but against a lion. During his youth, while walking through a vineyard, a young lion attacked him, and Samson, without any weapon, tore it apart as if it were a lamb. Judges 14 verses 5-6. This event not only reveals his strength but also a crucial aspect. His strength came from the Spirit of God that moved him in moments of need. This episode serves as a symbolic introduction to Samson's life. He did not fight for himself but as part of something greater, a divine plan. The strength he demonstrated in battles was always linked to the mission God entrusted to him, and this episode with the lion is a reminder of that. The victory over the lion also reflects how, often, God enables us to overcome challenges that seem insurmountable, as long as we are aligned with His purpose. Despite his extraordinary strength, Samson soon began to stray from God's plan, as demonstrated by his marriage to a Philistine woman. This event introduces a pattern of impulsive decisions in his life. During the wedding feast, he proposed a riddle to the guests, based on his experience with the lion. The Philistines, unable to solve the riddle, resorted to Samson's wife to betray him, revealing Samson's tendency to blindly trust in fragile relationships. Judges 14 verse 14. These early feats of Samson, though impressive, already indicate the first signs that his strength was being used impulsively. He defeated enemies and beasts with ease, but also got involved in personal choices that complicated his mission. Thus, Samson's story serves as a metaphor for how our gifts can be used for good or can lead us down dangerous paths, depending on how we choose to use them. As his fame grew, Samson became a true threat to the Philistines. His physical strength was increasingly directed toward direct confrontations with them. One of the most notable episodes was when he defeated 1,000 Philistines using only the jawbone of a donkey, Judges 15 verse 15. This scene, of a single man defeating an army with a rudimentary object, is the very definition of extraordinary strength. But once again, we see that his strength came from God, not just from his muscles. Despite his victories, Samson often acted impulsively, motivated by personal vengeance, as in the case of the betrayal of his Philistine wife and in-laws. This reveals a pattern in his life. He was physically strong but often fought not for the divine purpose but out of pride and anger. This combination of strength and impulsiveness made him feared by the Philistines but also distanced him from his original mission, which was to free Israel in a wise and just manner. A clear example of his impulsiveness was when he tore out the gates of the city of Gaza and carried them a great distance just to escape an ambush, Judges 16 verse 3. This feat, though impressive, also shows Samson's recklessness. He trusted too much in his strength and underestimated the dangers surrounding him. Excessive confidence in his physical abilities, without due consideration of the risks, would eventually be his downfall. Samson's fight against the Philistines is a clear representation of how we can be called to great purposes but at the same time get lost in personal battles. Like him, how often do we use our gifts and talents impulsively, without thinking about the consequences or the greater purpose we should fulfill? Samson's strength, though extraordinary, was only part of the equation. The real challenge was using it wisely. As legendary as his physical strength was, Samson had weaknesses that haunted him, and they were closely linked to his personal choices. Although he was feared by his enemies, his impulsive decisions and relationships repeatedly put him in dangerous situations. His first Philistine wife was one such choice, and his decisions, often made based on emotions, ended up diverting him from his divine mission. These weaknesses were clear to his enemies, who quickly realized that Samson's strength was not his most vulnerable point. Instead, it was his emotional desires and inability to control his passions that put him at risk. This became evident in his relationship with Delilah, a Philistine woman whom enemy leaders used to discover the secret of his strength. Delilah took advantage of Samson's emotional vulnerability to manipulate him for the benefit of the Philistines. Delilah tried several times to discover Samson's secret, and despite his initial lies to mislead her, he eventually succumbed to emotional pressure. This moment reveals Samson's weak point. No matter how physically strong he was, he couldn't resist his own emotions. Delilah finally managed to get him to reveal that his strength was tied to his hair, a symbol of his consecration to God, and the Philistines wasted no time in betraying him, Judges 16 verse 17. Samson's downfall shows us that even the strongest are vulnerable when they cannot control their impulses. His emotional weaknesses, more than any enemy army, were what truly brought him down. This lesson applies to all of us. We may be blessed with great talents and abilities, but if we do not know how to control our internal weaknesses, we may end up destroying what we have built. The relationship between Samson and Delilah is one of the most dramatic moments of his life. Delilah, used by the Philistines to discover the secret of his strength, manipulated Samson's trust until he finally revealed that the secret lay in his Nazirite vow. After cutting Samson's hair while he slept, the Philistines captured him, blinded him, and took him prisoner to Gaza. Delilah's betrayal was not only a physical defeat for Samson but also a demonstration of how blind trust can lead to downfall. Delilah used her closeness to Samson to pressure him into revealing the secret of his strength. 3 times he tried to deceive her, but finally, after emotional insistence, he gave in and told the truth. This reveals one of the most human aspects of Samson, his inability to resist emotional manipulation, even knowing that his life depended on keeping this secret. By revealing the secret of his strength, Samson was not only breaking a vow but betraying the trust God had placed in him. His emotional weakness allowed his enemies to achieve the victory they couldn't attain through physical strength. Samson's fall is a reminder of how our internal weaknesses can be exploited by others and how our greatest strength can be lost when we do not protect what is most important. At the moment of his capture, Samson lost not only his strength but his identity as Israel's deliverer. Delilah's story teaches us about the dangers of blindly trusting people who do not share our values and purpose. In the end, Samson's strength could not save him from his own vulnerability, and his downfall was a direct consequence of misplaced trust. Despite his fall, Samson's story does not end in defeat. After being captured and humiliated by the Philistines, he experienced a period of reflection and reconnection with God. The growth of his hair in prison is more than a physical sign. It symbolizes the beginning of his spiritual redemption. Although the Philistines believed they had destroyed Samson, they underestimated the power of his renewed faith in God. While imprisoned, Samson was brought to the temple of Dagon during a celebration where the Philistines mocked his weakness. But in this moment of total humiliation, Samson made one last prayer to God, asking that his strength be restored for a brief moment so that he could avenge himself on his enemies and fulfill his purpose. Judges 16 verse 28. This prayer marks a change in Samson. He was no longer seeking vengeance for personal reasons but to fulfill the divine plan. With a final effort, Samson pushed the pillars of the temple, collapsing it upon himself and his enemies, sacrificing his life to defeat the Philistines. At that moment, he accomplished the greatest feat of his life, killing more Philistines in his death than in his entire life. This final sacrifice was a demonstration that even in the most desperate situations, God can use those who turn to Him with repentance and faith. Samson's redemption teaches us that regardless of our mistakes, it is never too late to return to God and fulfill the purpose He has given us. His death was not the end of his mission but the consummation of his destiny. And thus, Samson's true strength was revealed, not in his muscles but in his final trust in God. For us, this story serves as a reminder that redemption is always within reach if we are willing to reconnect with our divine purpose. Samson's life offers us profound lessons about the nature of strength, weakness, and redemption. His physical strength, though impressive, was secondary to his obedience to God. Even with his failures and impulses, Samson shows us that true strength comes from a deep spiritual connection. His story is a powerful reminder that no matter how much we may fall, God always offers us an opportunity for redemption. Like Samson, we all have gifts and abilities that can be used for good or can lead us astray. The key is to recognize our weaknesses and trust that God can restore us, even when everything seems lost. True strength is not just in resisting but in knowing how to rise after the fall. Now, I invite you to reflect, which areas of your life need restoration? Where do you need to find your true strength, the one that comes from a deeper connection with God? If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. Share your opinion in the comments, and let's continue this journey together.